question is this. The question is this, guys. What if you make a promise that you realize that you should not keep? So we're going to be a little bit different tonight than we were last week. Last week we kind of did the Q&A right in the middle of our lessons. If you had a question, just ask it right in the middle of the question. But tonight, to make things flow a little bit more smoothly, I want you guys to just hold your questions to the end. And so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of give our lesson, and then we're going to just open it up for discussion, all right? All right, so here we go. What if you have made a promise that you probably shouldn't keep? And first of all, this is really it's a tricky question because of how many possible variables that can be involved, such as, what if I make a good promise, but somehow I just physically cannot keep it? You know, like you promise somebody that you're going to be somewhere, and then your traffic hits you and you just can't get there, or your car breaks down and you just can't get there, or you get sick and you just can't get there, or you made a promise that you're going to do something, and then, you know, for example, I gave this example with the guys in the small group. I gave an example to the guys. I said, I really hate making promises anyway, because I don't want to be in the position that I can't keep my promise, right, Chavion? You know what I'm saying? I don't like to be in a position where, you know, I make a promise and then I kind of have to break it. Like, I got a phone call from the Firefighters Association. They're always trying to raise money and everything, right? So, you know, they kept bugging me to, oh, you can make a pledge and you can, you know, wait in a couple of weeks to pay it. I'm like, dude, I don't even know if I'm going to have no money in a couple of weeks. You know, a couple of weeks is like a couple of weeks away. It always is. But I'm like, you know, and they keep, you know, we can send you, and this is what I really don't like. They said, we'll send you complimentary concert ticket. We'll go ahead and send it out, and then you just send us the money when you're ready. Well, you know, they sent me a doggone ticket. I ain't sent them no money yet, and I feel like a thief and a liar. Because I don't like to make a promise that I probably can't keep. But that's just one example. See, there's other examples too. I mean, that's a good promise that you just can't keep. But what about those other kinds of promises that you realize that you probably shouldn't keep, such as somebody who in here can relate to this? Somebody walks up to you and says, "If I tell you something, you promise not to tell nobody else," and then you say, "Sure." And why do you say sure? Because you really want to hear the juicy gossip, right? But then all of a sudden they tell you something that's like holds you legally liable, like, you know, you promise not to tell nobody. I got $300 in my book bag that I got off the teacher's desk.
Hey, just play. You don't have to share the limit. You let it off for no reason.
This girl gave you $200 for no reason. You wait. Oh, that's important. Hey, that's really important. You need to give me her name and number so I can invite her to church. Hey, is she giving out money? I want to be her friend. But no, seriously. Seriously though. Who in here has been in that situation where somebody says, you know, promise not to tell, and then they tell you something that you know you have to tell, or else either you'll be in danger or somebody else will be in danger, or it's like breaking the law if you don't tell. You know, in the ministry, here's the thing. I'm just going to go ahead and tell y'all something, especially for you guys in the youth group. It's important that y'all know this. I hope that if you guys ever get into a bad situation, like if you're dealing with drugs, or if you're considering suicide, or if you're being sexually assaulted or something like that, I pray that you guys will trust me enough and feel comfortable enough to tell me. But those situations, legally, I cannot keep it a secret. All right? Because, number one, is that a good promise to keep? To keep the promise that you are in danger. or to keep the promise that you are putting yourself at risk. And that's the kind of promises that I'm talking about. But before we even talk about should you keep the promise, I'm going to ask this question to you guys first. First question I want to ask, raise your hand if you believe that the Bible says that you should not make a promise. Let me ask the question again. Does the Bible say that you should not make promises? Or does the Bible simply say, if you make a promise, you better keep it no matter what? That's what I think we should be asking ourselves tonight. Does the Bible really say that you should keep your promises no matter what, even if it's a bad thing? All right, let us turn for a moment to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5, it comes right after Matthew chapter 4 and right before Matthew chapter 6. Always has, always will. Matthew chapter 5, and this is Jesus talking about promises, okay? Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 through 37. Jesus says, "Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but you shall perform your oaths to the Lord." That basically means that Jesus says, back in the day they told you that you should not make yourself a liar by breaking your promises, but that you should keep your promises no matter what. And then he goes on and says, "But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king, nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black. But let your yes be yes, your no be no, because whatever is more than this is from the evil one." Anybody ever heard somebody tell you, "Don't say I swear to God"? Now, I'm not asking you to point out who says it. Has anybody ever told you, "Don't say I swear to God"? I just said, don't tell me if you said it. I'm saying, has anybody ever told you that you shouldn't say that? Well, Jesus is saying that right here, Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 through 37. Jesus basically says, don't swear to God, don't swear by heaven, don't swear by earth, and don't even swear by yourself, because at the end of the day, you don't know whether you can keep your promises or not. Like, dude, if somebody tells me to keep a secret, yeah, I can keep it. Or if somebody tells me, or if I tell somebody that I'm going to go somewhere and do something, if I promise that I'm going to do something, I can keep my promise. At the end of the day, you don't know that. And so Jesus is basically saying here in these verses, don't make a promise that you can't keep. More than that, don't make a promise at all, because you don't know whether or not you can keep it. Because why would you risk your reputation on your word? Why don't you build your reputation by your lifestyle, by your actions? You know what I'm saying? Yes, sir. All right, he just asked a question, says, would it be a promise if somebody asks you to do something and you say, "I will if I can"? No, because what you're doing is you're putting a stipulation on it. You're not absolutely guaranteeing something. You're saying, if I can do something, I'll do something. And that's really what Jesus is saying here. He is basically telling you, says, please don't swear to God, because if you swear to God, you know what you're doing? When you say, "I swear to God," you're basically saying that your reputation, or you're risking God's reputation by your own weakness. And what I mean by that is, you say you swear to God, and then whatever you swear, you promise to God doesn't happen. You know what you're doing? You're saying that it's God's fault. All right? So basically what Jesus is saying here, he's saying, do not swear at all, because there's no reason to risk your reputation on something that you can't control. Instead, just say, okay, just say yes or no, and leave it at that, and then do the best you can. And that's what it says in James chapter 4. what I said to the guys in the large group. Put your hand down. James chapter 4 in the large group, in the small group with the guys, what I told them was James says that proud, boastful, arrogant people tell you what they are going to do. They guarantee what they're going to do tomorrow. And at the end of the day, you have no idea what tomorrow is going to bring. You might not even be alive tomorrow. Then every promise that you made, you broke. So here, when it comes to making the promise itself, Jesus is teaching here that making a promise or an oath or a pledge is to risk your reputation on what you may or may not be able to do. So Jesus warns us not to build our character on our words, but let our lives be defined by our faithful actions alone. Right? So basically, here's the thing. Have you ever known somebody that is very untrustworthy? You ever known somebody that's very untrustworthy? So, how about this? You've got that untrustworthy person, and you're in a situation where that's the only person that you can trust. And so when you go to that person and you say, for example, he's like, okay, I need you to call this person and tell this person ABC, okay, whatever. You need to tell this person such and such and such. And they'll be like, okay. You're like, promise me you're going to do this, 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 this. And they're like, okay. I'm like, are you sure? And they're like, okay. Why do you ask them to promise? You ask them to promise because they're not trustworthy. So the whole reason for making a promise is to try to earn trust. Jesus is saying, don't try to earn somebody's trust by making a promise. Earn their trust by doing the right thing all the time. And that's it. So that's the whole thing about. So that's what the Bible says about making promises. But let's go ahead and go past that to what if you have already made a promise that maybe you shouldn't keep? What if you have bound yourself to a promise, but that promise might involve something that you disagree with, such as the illustration I gave a few minutes ago. What if a friend came to you and told you, I got to tell you something, dude. But if I tell you, you got to promise not to tell anybody else. You'd be like, okay. And girls, let's just say girls here. Girls, your friend says, I'm pregnant. You say, but you can't tell nobody. All right? But worse than that, your parents are best friends with their parents. And you start playing the scenario in your head, and you're like, okay, in about 3 or 4 months, she ain't going to be able to keep the secret herself. And her parents and my parents are best friends, and her parents and my parents know that we're best friends, and so if they find out, and then they know that I know, it's going to be deep doo-doo for me. What if that's the situation that you're in? Somebody's come to you with a bombshell secret, and not only is it a secret, a really, really juicy gossip secret, but it's one that you know should not be a secret, but you have promised not to tell. Guys, your friend comes up to you and says, dude, I got to tell you something. You know that girl? That girl pregnant. And she says it's mine. And worse than that, she's underage. All right. Listen, I'm not trying to say this kind of stuff just to rattle your cage. I'm saying this stuff because I know that this is what y'all deal with. So check it out. So you're in this situation now to where you promised not to tell before you even knew what you made a promise to, and then they told you, and they looked you in the eye and said, now you promised you wouldn't tell nobody. What should you do? You have bound yourself. You have bound yourself to an oath. You have bound yourself to keep a promise that you know at the end of the day you should not keep. Number one, you shouldn't keep the promise because by keeping the promise you could get yourself in trouble and you can lose the trust of your parents and everybody else. Second of all, you know that if you kept the promise you would be doing a great disservice to your friend. What's up? All right, see, that's a promise. You're saying you won't tell nobody. All right, because if you say I won't tell nobody, and then you tell somebody, then you lied. So here's our situation. Our situation is that you made a promise, and then you found out that that promise is something that you probably shouldn't keep. Number one, because if you really want to be a good friend, you want to help that friend, and by helping that friend, you're going to tell people that can help, right? So here's your dilemma. You've got two choices. You can keep a promise and compromise your faith. Because by keeping a promise, you know you're doing less than the right thing. You see what I'm saying? Or you can break your promise and compromise your reputation and your friendship. So you can keep the promise to your friend and put you and your friend in possible jeopardy, and not only that, but you're keeping a promise, and by keeping that promise, you know you're not doing what God wants you to do. Or second, you can break a promise, and the Bible says, "Thou shalt not bear false witness." That means you should not lie. So by telling your friend you're not going to tell, and then you tell, you're lying. So is that something that's dishonoring to God? What is it? What should we do? I'm going to answer that for y'all today. I want to help y'all out. Galatians chapter 1, verse 10. And that is right before verse 11. 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians. Okay, there you go. Galatians. I'm just telling you where it's at. It's after 2 Corinthians. Galatians chapter 1. I love the Apostle Paul because the Apostle Paul is not scared to say the hard stuff. That's what I like about him. And he says this right here. Paul says, "Am I seeking to please men or God? Because if I still please man, I would not be a servant of Christ." Galatians 1:10, Paul says this, "Who am I trying to live for? Am I trying to live to make my friends happy? Or am I trying to live my life in such a way that honors God and seeks to do good to all people?" Your friends might think that it's good for you to keep a bad promise because that's what friends are for. But at the end of the day, why do you think, now this is like psychology right here, but why do you think your friend told you to begin with? They told you not because they just want somebody to share their burden. They want somebody to help them. Your friends oftentimes tell you these types of things because they need help and they don't know how to help themselves. But anyway, Galatians 1:10, Paul says, sometimes you're in a situation where you can't please everybody. Do you know that? Who in here knows how to please everybody? If you know how to please everybody all the time, please counsel me. But in truth, you can't please everybody all the time. Okay? But you can always do the right thing. And the right thing doesn't always make everybody happy. So can you seek to please man and God at the same time? No. And Paul says that. Paul says sometimes you're going to have to do things to make people mad in order to glorify God. So in this conflict between maintaining your integrity and keeping your word, it really comes down to this. Would I want to let people look down on me so that God can be pleased with me? And what I mean by that is, you've got your friend. They've told you this bombshell secret that, number one, is going to cause a lot of conflict. It's going to bring a lot of chaos into the world. But by telling people, you're doing more good by breaking your promise than if you kept your promise and let this thing ride. Are you willing to break a promise that should never be kept to begin with in order to do the ultimate good? Because who in here has ever had to, at the end of the day, you had to break a promise because it was what was good for everybody? What did you do? What was the secret? I said, have you ever broke a promise because you knew you had to? All right, what was that? There you go. The best friend wanted to commit suicide. But at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, you come to discover that they told you to keep that secret so that you could help them. You know, that's really what it all comes down to. Some people just want somebody that would have the guts to do what's right because they don't have the strength themselves. So, I want to put a twist on this, and then we're going to open it up for discussion. Anybody want to ask any questions or just comment on something? Here's the last question. How can breaking your promise actually build your testimony? How can breaking your promise actually build your testimony? This is what I'm talking about. Somebody comes to you, says, I need you to do this, or I need you to promise me that you won't tell anybody so-and-so, A, B, C, D, whatever the story is. And at the end of the day, you turn to that person who's like, I'm sorry, I cannot do what you have asked. I know I told you that I would, but at the end of the day that I can't. And they will ask you why, and then you will have the opportunity to tell them about your faith. You will tell them, I can't do this. Other people might be able to do this, but I can't do this because at the end of the day, I want to honor God with my life, and by keeping this promise or by doing ABC, I would not be honoring God. And they might be mad for a while, but you know what they'll go away doing? They'll go away knowing that you are a person of integrity and that you are a person that can be trusted with the truth.
Wouldn't you not be a good friend if you didn't say something?
He said, would you not be a good friend if you didn't say something? Absolutely. That's the point. Like Katie said back there in the back, she said that a friend came to her and said that they were thinking of committing suicide. What if she would have kept her promise and her friend also made good on that threat? The friend would be dead, and then Katie would be spending the rest of her life wondering, what if I'd have done the right thing? And that's really what it comes down to. Should you keep every promise that you make? That's why Jesus warns us, don't make a promise, because some promises need to be broken. All right, and that was one of them. By breaking that promise, she could possibly very, very well saved a friendship or saved a life, you know. All right? Anybody else? What you got?
If you had to keep a promise, but you decide not to, wouldn't you be helping that person and having your faith in God at the same time?
Say that again?
If you were supposed to keep a promise, but you didn't, and you would still be helping that person and having your faith in God at the same time?
Yeah, I tell you what, because it's a really, really interesting thing to study. This will be a good Q&A question too, because, I mean, we could really go into this. She said, by breaking your promise, which is essentially doing what? Lying, right? You said you do something and then you did something else. Wouldn't you be helping a friend and honoring God at the same time? Actually, yeah. I can't remember what, but in Hebrews chapter 11, it actually talks about Rahab. Rahab was a prostitute in the city of Jericho, I believe it was. What was it, Jericho? No, Canaan. Canaan. She was a prostitute in the land of Canaan, and the spies came in. She feared God because she had seen what God had done through the Israelites. When the spies came in, she hid them in the roof of her house. And then when the soldiers of the town came in and said, where are these spies? She lied. But what ultimately happened at the end of the day? God honored not the lie, but her heart and her faith, because she did not necessarily a good thing, but for a good reason. And at the end of the day, God honored that. So yeah, I mean, by breaking a promise that should have never been kept in the first place, that essentially does honor God, because the reason for breaking the promise was right.